Welcome to my humble abode. I'm Yoki the Tailspinner, and this Tailed Over Coffee. And we start the day with an additive game and a cup of coffee together in the hopes of welcoming a blessed day. Turn now to Stray Gods, the role-playing musical. We return to speak to Pan. See what's going on there.
I hope you're here, because I don't know where else to look for you.
Of course I'm here, Grace. Where else would I be but amongst the trees and the wild things? I really must thank you, by the by. Asterion is simply over the moon, and he's already repaid me with this select tome from the reliquary.
Wanted a book?
That's why you did all this? Because you wanted some book?
Not just some book, but a tome from the forbidden depths.
I doubt Hecate would be pleased.
Oh, most assuredly not. Neither would Athena, which makes it all the more delicious. I trust you got what you needed. More grist for the mill of your innocence, as it were.
I learned a lot.
It's quite the coincidence. The place you sent me just happens to be the place Calliope was attacked.
That is quite the coincidence. You must be very grateful.
It's just hard to trust a coincidence that big.
You have no reason to be suspicious. I know nothing of what happened to Calliope at the reliquary.
Sure.
I suppose the question at the heart of this is, do you believe me?
No. Oh, without proof.
Give me a reason to believe you, Pan.
You want the ever-elusive proof. If I had that to offer, do you think I would hesitate to share it?
Quite
Alas,
possibly.
it is my burden to be forever condemned by my idle brethren. I've become accustomed to it. Truly. I've never lied to you, Grace, and I never shall. If you're looking for innocence, however, well, I'm afraid that's one thing I cannot provide.
And if I can't accept that? If I find out you're somehow involved in this?
You'll do what you do, and I'll do what I do, and we'll see where that takes us.
Oh, I actually believe you're a truth teller, Pan. I just don't believe you're honest. Take, for instance, someone says you've done something, and you respond, "How can you say that about me?" Your indignation is often taken as a denial. It's not. It's merely a question. I still need your help.
If you're still up for trading favors, I could use more help.
Oh, of course you could. You could live the high life, Grace. Throw caution to the wind. Embrace what you can before you...
Before I die?
Yeah.
You don't have any hope for me, do you? You're just taking what you can get before it's over.
Probably. But if he can be useful to you, so what?
You'll want to find Medusa, I suppose.
Yeah, her name keeps coming up.
You'll find Medusa at a dingy little club appropriately named the Viper's Nest. Give her my regards. But do be careful if you call on her, Grace. Medusa is a hideous monster and should be treated as such.
It was by Perseus. At least according to myth, most of which we now realize is false. Let's chat with Persephone again.
Back from your visit to the reliquary?
How did you know I was there?
Athena was ranting about it when I left her. She's none too pleased about you breaking the rules. Let's hope what you learned was worth it. Medusa was at the reliquary that night. You don't intend to confront her directly, do you?
You think I shouldn't?
You think I shouldn't? How else will I find out why she was there?
There's always a way, Grace. Asking someone directly isn't the only method.
Thing to her?
While I hate to say it, confronting Medusa may be your best option.
You could come with me when I talk to her.
Trust me, if I'm anywhere within a mile, she'll have vanished by the time you so much as knock on her door. Just lie to me and say you'll be careful. On a different matter, I've had time to do some thinking. I may have been too dismissive after Aphrodite's party. You no doubt have many questions about the Eidolon and Calliope's memories.
Apollo told me a little about it. He did say I should talk to you, though.
Did he now? Is there anything you'd like to ask?
Will I feel different as I change?
When all these memories start to return, will I feel different?
First, you'll have dreams. Places you've never been, people you've never met. But unlike with normal dreams, these will linger. Then they will come while you're awake. Sudden flashes or snippets of déjà vu. And sometimes it will seem so real you'll swear you're hallucinating. If there's anything difficult about the process, is that it becomes hard to differentiate between your life and all these other lives you're now recalling.
It does sound confusing.
Confusing and often unpleasant, as not all the memories will be
Oh,
fun
yeah,
ones.
absolutely.
But that will pass in time.
Will I still remember my own life?
You said it becomes hard to differentiate your life from the others. How hard, exactly? It'll still be me, right?
Oh, how do I explain this? Grace, would you say that you are who you are because of your experiences? The things you've lived and done?
I guess so, sure.
At least
Well, all
partially.
the things Calliope has done, and those before her, will now be yours. They will feel like a part of your life as well. Thus, they can't help but shape you. The Grace that is now will be and will have done so much more. Fortunately, you don't have to deal with every memory. Each time the Eidolon passes on, the oldest memories fade.
Ah.
And that helps.
Yeah. I mentioned being a survivor of abuse before. One of the hardest things to deal with is faded memories. Makes you doubt what's gone on. Always fading memories a good thing.
Wait, how is it good that old memories start to fade?
Think of how old we are, Grace. If all those memories returned to you with perfect clarity, they would destroy you.
Yeah, but doesn't that mean you've all forgotten so much?
Well, far more than we remember. The further I think back, the more it becomes a bit of a blur, actually. You'll recall important moments. Some will be mixed up with the stories mortals tell, and you won't be sure which is the memory and which is the story.
Interesting.
An idol's memory is a series of islands in a dark ocean, and they become smaller and smaller as they recede into the horizon. It sounds dire, but you become accustomed to it. It just takes time. And now you have all the time in the world.
Not less than a week. How many times have you died, passed on, given up to others?
How many times have you died? Can I ask that?
We call it passing on. I've lost track of just how many times I've passed on my Eidolon. A dozen? It's happened less often in more recent eras.
And the one you told me about, the woman married to that gangster? She was the most recent?
I don't think of Chastity as a she. That was me, just as the one my husband blasted with a shotgun was also me.
Wow.
It was one of the few times I wasn't able to prepare my successor. We were friends, yes, but I didn't know what Persephone was, and I had no idea what I'd just become.
That must have been difficult.
It was more difficult taking over my dead husband's territory. Women weren't often mobsters in those days.
Yeah. Really a gangster?
Were you really a gangster? I've heard it said, but it sounds...
Let me put it this way. I felt as if I'd been blessed by a dying woman who saved me from a prison of my own making. I didn't know what I was, but I was free. I felt more alive than I'd ever felt before, and strong enough to toss an ox 10 feet. Did I set out to become a mobster? Not exactly. My husband's friends thought I'd murdered him, however, so they came after me. And one thing led to another.
Yeah, I can believe that.
I see.
Athena found me just as my memories were starting to return. I wasn't permitted to continue doing something so noticeable, so I was carted off to Olympus. It's too bad, really. I was an excellent mobster.
That's a boast, I suppose. Is it possible to die forever?
Wait, you said that Persephone passed on her eidolon as she lay dying. What if she had just died?
The eidolon will keep us alive for a time, even in the most horrific circumstances, in hopes that there's someone to pass it on to.
What if there isn't? What if Chastity had died before you were shot?
Well, then the line of Persephone would have ended then and there.
Mm.
Oh, there are some stories that say an eidolon will go wandering, that it never really dies. And who knows if there's any truth to that.
Interesting.
It's not exactly something we've had the opportunity to study. All we know is that many idols have left us forever. They've died, and that's how it happens.
It's a lot to consider. Assuming I'll even have time to worry about it, what with the trial coming.
Either the trial will end poorly, in which case all of this is moot, or it will end well, and you will have plenty of time to digest.
Yeah, thanks for the update.
I'm a realist, Grace. It's what I'm best at. Now then, unless you've something else to ask.
Fascinating. So you don't lose who you are, but of course who you are, influenced in large part by your experiences, changes because the experiences you're aware of changes. Which makes perfect sense. You are you plus and you minus in some way. Wow. Fascinating. Tell me about the idols.
I'd like to know a little more about the idols. I am one now, right?
What constitutes a little more in this instance?
Well, what are we? Where did we come from? If an idol is a soul that moves from person to person, it must have started somewhere, right?
Ah, the big question. To which the answer is, nobody knows. I remember the original Persephone only vaguely. Indeed, I'm not even certain she was the original. Was there something before her? How did she get her idol on? I couldn't tell you. Evidently, we wrote little down in those early days, or were forbidden to, and our memories only stretch back so far. Anything beyond that simply isn't.
How can you not know where you're from? Amnesia. It's a form of amnesia. We'll ask for Grace because she can't get that yet.
Psst. Isn't it strange to not know where you come from? For all you know, the idols could be aliens.
Aliens? Grace, you watch too many movies.
Gods are okay, but aliens are just wacky fiction.
Fine, yes. It is strange. No, our earliest days aren't the only blanks in our memories, however. We have many. And the last was the day Zeus called us all together to tell us Rome had fallen and we should prepare for war. But did that war occur? I couldn't tell you. The last thing I remember after Rome was 1,000 years later, in the 16th century. I was in a different body, feeling as if no time at all had passed. Athena calls that period the gap. That's what it feels like. All of us experienced it, and not one of us knows why or how.
If the eidolon must pass on to someone else or end forever, then it doesn't make sense that there could be a 1,000-year gap, especially if it's only the older memories you forget. So what explains that? Maybe they'll come to that. This is intriguing. Tell more about the gap.
Gap, you mentioned. What was that like? Did you just wake up one day, or...?
I wasn't asleep. I lived. I had lives. And I passed on my eidolon. I may have known who I was and what I was, but perhaps I was completely unaware. All I know is that one day, Athena came to my nunnery, near Trieste, I think. The moment that I saw her, all the old memories came flooding back. My life during the gap was wiped away in an instant, and it never returned. If someone did that to us,
Why?
they were powerful indeed.
Why that
What
millennium?
about Athena? I mean, she's the one who found you, right? She must have been aware.
Athena woke up on her own, or so she claims, and spent the next century rounding up those idols who remained. Zeus, however, was gone. What became of him, what happened in Rome, we've never pieced it together. It's troubling.
And again, what does gone mean? She said that there's rumours that they travel the world until they find someone. Or looking for someone. Are they truly gone? Or do they still exist? Have they become distant from the idols, the gods, and yet they're the people who are influential in society? Going their own way, maybe. Intriguing. Tell me about the war.
Tell me more about the war. It seems to have had a huge effect on all of you.
That's putting it mildly.
From Aphrodite's song, I know Ares betrayed everyone. What did you do?
Honestly, after my mother was murdered, I barely remember.
Your mother?
Her name was Demeter. Not truly my mother, but an idol who had always cared for me since the early days. I thought we'd be together forever. Then Ares brought those filthy bastards down on us. Demeter was slain by bullets. By bullets. Until that day, I had believed we were untouchable.
What's so special about bullets that could touch you? Or is it because they were inspired by Ares? God of War? What's so powerful about the Nazis that they could take you down? I assume... The other thing is that because they were mentioning jackbooted and so on, I'm assuming that they're talking about the Nazis, not imperialist Japan. But the secret weapon sounds a lot more like the atomic bomb than anything that we used against the Nazis. Why did Ares do it?
Why would Ares do that? Did he get anything out of it in the end, or...?
What he got was a final death. A few of us hunted him down and made sure he paid for his betrayal. He choked on his own blood. As for why he did it, who knows? He thought us a lost cause. He wanted glory. He wanted more than we had, living in secret. After that, I don't know. We went from hiding place to hiding place. I didn't even know what Hephaestus had done for us when I found myself on a boat. We might have been gods once, but after the war, we were just refugees, like so many others, fleeing to a distant land.
What changed? Tell me about Hades.
Are you willing to talk about Hades? If you don't want to, that's fine. I'm just...
Incredibly curious how I ended up murdering my husband.
that, yeah.
You know, one might think that my hatred of Hades began when he kidnapped me and forced me to be his bride. But honestly, that wasn't it. I hated my brothers and sisters for letting it happen. But Hades himself terrified me. He had a presence. I mean, one that forever made him the most important man in the room. And me? Oh, I was nothing in comparison. When Hades began doting on me, trying to earn my favor, I swooned that he might deign to think of me that way. For centuries, I actually thought I was in love, that the kidnapping was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny how our perspectives change.
Yeah, indeed. What changed between you and Hades then?
If you got along
What
with
was
Hades
it?
for so long, what changed?
I did. I grew up. I was a trophy for Hades. A conquest that he expected to remain meek and unchanging forever. He went out of his way to keep me small.
Wow.
I slowly realized that, he'd always been that way.
Mm-hmm.
Manipulation and arrogance behind the handsome sneer. We battled for centuries. I hated him, and I told him so, but he refused to part with me. He declared that I was his and would stay in the underworld where I belonged.
And that's when you killed him?
That's when I killed him, yes. The first time one idol had ever murdered another. Thank you very much.
What a portrayal of domestic violence. It's not perfect, but yes. People say, why do they stay? But there are many, many reasons, including love. Not being ready to face what the person is, while the person does everything they can to keep you isolated, small, dependent. There can even be abuse going both ways. Generally with one being far more abusive than the other. So finally it's time that you are able to leave strong enough. Desperate enough. They say it takes, I don't know for a man, but plenty of men being abused too. But more often it's the woman who's the victim. They say it takes an abused victim of domestic violence, at least a woman, 7 times on average to actually leave their abusive partner. They are bringing in some really, really heavy references in this game. And it's stronger for it, if you know what you're doing. If not, it probably just feels like a really interesting, fun game. This is so deep. You're punished for killing Hades, right?
I'm guessing the other idols weren't
And
thrilled
that's
with
not
you
unknown
killing
either.
Hades.
Well, yeah, they didn't know what to do with me. And Athena was furious that the most powerful remaining idol had been lost. See, this was before the war and before all the new rules. The chorus had never once contemplated execution, but they certainly considered it then. In the end, they decided it was better to humiliate me. They ensured I did not benefit from Hades' murder, and stripped the throne I had wrested from his grasp.
Which you weren't happy about.
I asked them where they were all those years while I pleaded for help.
Mm-hmm.
I was held captive, and what was I expected to do? What, lie down and take it forever because Hades was more useful to them alive? No. I stopped doing what was expected of me the day I slit his throat. May he rot in Tartarus with the Titans for all eternity.
As I say, a family blaming the victim who finally stands up, that's not exactly unknown either. Wow. How did you end up running a nightclub?
How did you go from ruling the underworld to opening a nightclub named after it?
I won it in a bet with Dionysus, god of merriment.
Okay, there has to be a story there.
Well, the story is that he was a fool, but a charming one with many patrons.
Mm-hmm.
They built him a nightclub as his personal playground. And it was a grand old time for Dionysus in the 1970s, I assure you. But he didn't know how to run a business.
Oh yeah, it sounds
By
about
the time
right.
Disco was ready to die, so was his stupid club. So I offered to make it profitable. If I succeeded, he would turn ownership over to me. He accepted because, frankly, all he wanted to do was
Yeah,
drink anyhow.
that's Dionysus God of
I
Wine.
was successful. The club became mine, and I kicked Dionysus out for never paying the tab.
Sucks to be him.
Dionysus ever sobers up, he might decide to be sore about it, but so far, that hasn't happened.
Yeah. Merriment and drunkenness, that's our boy Dionysus. Was it hard to come to the new world?
Was it hard for the idols to come to the new world? It's just a place like any other, isn't it?
Well, it wasn't the place that was hard, it was the fear. We knew we were vulnerable. We knew mortals could and would kill us. Suddenly, There were rules, we had to be secret, we had to stay close together. We huddled in the shadows and quaked each time the mortals so much as breathed in our direction. We couldn't all live that way. Some of us drifted away, faded into the night without so much as an explanation. That's what's been the hard part. Our inevitable decline in a place where we don't belong. We can pass on our eidolons as often as we like, but it will never truly be home.
What's the deal between you and Apollo?
What's the deal between you and Apollo? The way you two fight.
I've told you how he and the other idols stood by and let me rot with Hades, did I not?
You have.
It seems more personal than that.
Okay, there's an old saying that no one escapes the underworld. But that's not true. I did. Once. Not long after Hades kidnapped me. I was homesick, and I missed my mother. Charon took pity on me and allowed me across the Styx. And after that, Grace, I waded through darkness itself to get out of there. Hades chased after me relentlessly, but I evaded him, right up until I got to the very slopes of Olympus. And who do you suppose was the first idol I met?
Uh-oh.
Apollo stood there. I cried out to him, begging him not to let Hades take me, and yet Apollo did as he has always done. Absolutely nothing. Hades was thrilled, and I knew then and there I could never rely on my so-called family for anything, ever again.
Surprised you're still with him, to be honest. Tell me more about Calliope.
Tell me more about Calliope. You and her were good friends, right?
We were.
And
if you had told me a decade ago that I would become close to one of the muses, I would have laughed in your face. I always considered them Apollo's creatures. Calliope, Clio, and Talia. Vapid, frivolous gods who handed off their eidolon to any artist who took their fancy.
Well,
every time I met
thanks.
one of them, they were someone else. Apollo called them the Sisters of Beauty, no matter their gender. Can you imagine that? That's such a stupid name.
I never thought of that. Do idols change gender a lot?
Well, we tend to seek out successors like ourselves, but it happens.
Yeah.
With the muses, it happened frequently. Everywhere Apollo went, they surrounded him like a gaggle of ducklings, just like him to gather his own fans.
How did you end up friends with Calliope?
If you disliked the muses so much, how did you end up becoming friends with Calliope?
She sought me out. She'd become more and more unhappy on Olympus, so she decided to leave just as I had, long before. Calliope asked for my help, and I laughed in her face. Go ask one of your sycophant mortals, I told her. I mean, surely one of them has some threadbare couch you can sleep on.
Wow.
Typically, she was undeterred. She didn't just want a place to stay. She said she wanted to learn how to be truly independent from an idol who had mastered it. What can I say? I mean, I'm a sucker for a well-timed compliment. I took her in. Apollo was furious. He and Calliope were barely speaking, but he was certain she'd come crawling back to Olympus. Oh, it made taking her in all the sweeter.
I like Apollo less and less. The attitude of way too many partners who take people who take their partners for granted. Oh, they've come back before. They'll do it again. I don't need to change. I don't need to be better. I don't need to start trying. I can just let things go. Yeah, right, until it doesn't work, huh? You and Calliope became friends after you took her in.
After you took Calliope in, that's when you became friends?
Oh, no, not right away. I wasn't looking for a friend. What I was looking for was an opening act in the club. Calliope entertained here for years, and then eventually turned from performing to attracting new acts. She was in her element. She and I, Well, we warmed up to each other eventually. She was more capable than I expected, and I adored her furious rants.
Calliope didn't seem like the furious type when I met her. It's hard to picture.
Oh, then you didn't really meet her. She was an idealist, and nobody could ever quite live up to her standards for very long. Her brothers and sisters, least of all. The idols needed to change, she said. They were withering away in the shadows, diminished and unwilling to save their own skins. When I joined the chorus, she expected me to change everything, as if I could single-handedly override Athena. I was to be her champion, and together we would bring revolution to the idols. Well, I was yet another disappointment. She left the club, but I gave her a place to live. We were supposed to stay in touch, but you know how it went from there.
What happened to the other muses?
What happened to the other muses? You mentioned 2 others. Were they lost in the war?
Rio and
One of
Talia.
them was, though not like you think. The day we were to leave on the ship, Talia simply never showed up.
Do you know what happened to her?
We never heard from her again. Apollo thrashed about in mourning, but Talia had been fading away for years. It wasn't a surprise to the rest of us.
What about the other muse? Cleo.
Died long before. A victim at the hands of a mortal man, when she no longer possessed the power to bedazzle him. As I understand it, he kept her in a cage as a pet until her eidolon shriveled up and perished. He was dead before she was.
Ugh, that's pretty dark.
Yes, well, we come by our wariness of mortals honestly, Grace.
That's all I can think of for now. I'll see you around?
Oh, yes. That's where I'll be. Around.
Oh. This game is exploring so many paths in reality and putting it into a mythological perspective. I love it. That's what the myths did, if you think about it. Take the journal. Nothing on Freddy, surely. Calliope. Definitely told me a little about how Calliope came to her at the underworld. How at first Calliope was just a singing act, but eventually they warmed up to each other. Until Calliope's lofty expectations became too much. I'm willing to bet Persephone had just as much to do with her parting ways. Sounds like, for a while, they were close indeed. Persephone finally explained what her real beef with Apollo was about. Once she escaped from the underworld with Hades hot on her heels, and when she finally got to Olympus, she ran into was Apollo, and he did nothing. I'm trying to imagine what it would have been like to be dragged away by a smug Hades while the brother you thought would help you, who had come to know how desperate you were, just stood there, let it happen. Can't help but wonder if that's the entire story, but even so, it all makes sense now. Oh, I'm sure there's more to it than that. And let's face it, if the myths got anything right, the 3 most powerful idols or gods were Zeus, father of the gods, Poseidon, Poseidon, Neptune's the Roman one, ruler of the waves, and Hades of the underworld. Apollo was nothing compared to them. I mean, I wouldn't say nothing, but Persephone. I heard it mentioned a couple of times about how Persephone used to be a gangster. Apparently her eidolon was last passed on to Chastity, the wife of a mobster, who she then replaced for a while. At least until Persephone's memories returned. This must have been, what, the 1950s. Pretty crazy to think about. I finally learned a little about what Persephone and the other idols went through during the war. She told me about how Demeter died and how Ares betrayed them to the enemy. Just think, one day you believe you're a god for real, and next you will realise just how vulnerable you really are. That has to mess with all their heads, not just Aphrodite's. Finally, I know the whole story about Hades and how Persephone murdered him. You know what? Sounds like I got exactly what he deserved. Freddie and I went to the liquor to do Pan's little favour, and wouldn't you know it, that's where Clyde was actually know that. Nothing new on Eros, Venus, you, sir. Hecate, probably nothing new there. Or the Minotaur. Alright, my friends, enjoy your coffee. Hit the like, comment, and subscribe if you wish to help the channel grow. May you have a blessed day. Join us next time when we head off to Medusa's lair. See what's happening there.